follow along with. Because of this last week, I was at death's door multiple times, and because of Messy Church, I would have struggled to do this properly. So I found a really good resource, because the next step of what we're coming to in our journey through the Old Testament is that of this thing called the tabernacle. Now, would that be a brand new phrase for anybody here? Have you heard of something called the tabernacle? Okay, so let's quickly go through the journey we've done so far, and then we'll quickly explain that. We're going to jump right into this, because this video presentation is about 27 minutes. It is actually an explanation of all what the tabernacle looked like, the various bits that were in it, and how it all connects in. Okay? I've never seen, I don't think we've never done anything sort of like that here. Maybe you've seen something like this before or experienced this, but I thought it was really good. And then we're going to tie some bits together right at the end as we finish, okay? So let's go through what we've done so far. If you get your hands out, if you'd like to. This isn't everyone's thing, I get it, and that's okay. But I do know that hands and things help me to remember. That's the whole point. This isn't about embarrassing anybody. This is about trying to remember things, okay? So first we came to creation, and then the fall, and then the flood, followed by separation of the nations. And then came along Abraham and Isaac, followed by Joseph. Okay. And after that, there was a period of silence, followed by Moses, who came along with the message of, "Let my people go." And then, as Moses came out, God brought him to the Mount Sinai, where he delivered the law. Remember that, the law. Okay, whatever was your strong hand. I just wrote with my right hand. Okay, the law. And then God said that He wanted to establish a place for people to be able to gather to worship. And so they established this thing called the tabernacle. So we're going to do this. We're going to take sort of two fingers like we're not going to do this sort of thing. Okay? This is actually the American sign for tent. So I don't know what else better we could do. So we're going to do this for tabernacle. Because it literally was, okay, those two fingers right there. Tent. You can do it like that if you want to. Whatever helps you remember. Okay? Tabernacle. So there was a law, then there was the tabernacle. Tabernacle. Looks like a tent.
You got your fingers right, Johnny.
What's that? Okay, so that's what we're on about today. So on your paper, there's a bunch of blanks. Now, I try to be kind and helpful. Sometimes I succeed with that. Sometimes I don't. Thank you, Chris. And so you've got the beginning letter of all the missing words. Hopefully there's nothing too terrible. And the way it actually starts from the beginning, and as it goes through all the various bits in the talk, it just kind of goes right down like that, okay? So we'll turn the lights on. It should be bright enough so you can see. Do you need something to write on? Don't make it difficult for you. We have some of those boards that we can get up very quickly. Those are easy to do. Does everyone have something to write on? Dorian, you need something? You're okay. Right, okay. Certainly get something to write on, okay? So, he's going to start out in the very beginning, go right on down through. We're going to finish up with a few bits, and then we'll be done for the day. We're going to think about this whole thing of the tabernacle. Okay, Chase, I'm going to come back here, and I'm not sure if we still got Spotify going on. Do this. We still have this volume. Well, the reason is because this is a. Okay.
Have you got the pen box? That one's there. He's got one.
Okay, can everyone see? Do you want me to turn the lights on? We're all right?
Tell the sons of Israel to raise a contribution for me. from every man whose heart moves him, you shall raise my contribution, and let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I am going to show you, as the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the furniture. Just so you shall construct it. An amazing self-sustaining pillar of fire, partially veiled by clouds, became the visual cue the Israelites learned to follow after their miraculous escape from Egypt and the 400 years of slavery to the Pharaoh. After the parting of the Red Sea, it would seem that the Hebrew people would have eagerly obeyed everything that God asked them to do. But their investigation of the land God had promised them caused them to fear for their lives again. Yet this time, they did not give God the opportunity to show how he could deliver them. Instead, they chose their own way. Sadly, the result of this disobedience was to be forced to wander in the desert wilderness for 40 years. Yet, this nomadic lifestyle and the loss of the former promise did not mean that God had abandoned them. He had promised to dwell among them, so he commanded Moses to build a house of sorts. This dwelling place was for the God of a people who now lived in tents. This house was known as the Tabernacle. At night, the presence of God would appear as a pillar of fire to direct them and protect them. And by day, it would appear as a pillar of cloud. And throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the sons of Israel would set out. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out until the day when it was taken up. For throughout all their journeys, the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and there was fire in it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel. Whenever this divine cloud would stop, the sons of Israel would assemble and set up camp. Each tribe had specific instructions about where to establish its camp. In the center of the encampment was the tabernacle and the presence of God. The sons of Israel shall camp, each by his own standard, with the banners of their fathers' households. They shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. Now those who camp on the east side toward the sunrise shall be of the standard of the camp of Judah by their armies. And those who camp next to him shall be the tribe of Issachar. Then comes the tribe of Zebulun. On the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben by their armies. And those who camp next to him shall be the tribe of Simeon. Then comes the tribe of Gad. Then the tent of meeting shall set out with the camp of the Levites in the midst of the camps. Just as they camp, so they shall set out, every man in his place, by their standards. On the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim by their armies, and next to him shall be the tribe of Manasseh. Then comes the tribe of Benjamin. On the north side shall be the standard of the camp of Dan by their armies, and those that camp next to him shall be the tribe of Asher. Then comes the tribe of Naphtali. These are the numbered men of the sons of Israel by their fathers' households. The total of the numbered men of the camps by their armies, 603,550. The Levites, however, were not numbered among the sons of Israel, just as the Lord had commanded Moses.
Got up to number 6, by the way. We lost it. About question 6.
God is holy. Nothing unclean or anyone with sin can exist in the presence of God. So a separation was created to keep the sin of the people apart from the holiness of God. This outer curtain was the beginning of that separation. No one harboring sin could pass through it, and the sole purpose in going beyond its borders was to seek atonement or the forgiveness of sins. And he erected the court all around the tabernacle and the altar, and hung up the veil for the gateway of the court. Thus Moses finished the work. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting, because the cloud had settled on it. Man cannot survive in God's presence unless he is invited and is completely pure, and so even Moses, the man of God, had to wait until the cloud lifted before he could even enter the tabernacle. We will begin at the east gate, a curtain skillfully woven of blue, purple, and scarlet, and of finely twisted linen. Entering into the courtyard, we come to the place where the first step in meeting with God was taken. In the understanding of the seemingly cruel sacrifices comes the beauty of forgiveness and a position of right standing with God.
Build an altar of acacia wood, 3 cubits high. It is to be square, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide.
Cubit is about 18
Make
inches.
a horn at each of the 4 corners, so that the horns and the altar are of one piece. And overlay the altar with bronze. Make poles of acacia wood for the altar, and overlay them with bronze. The poles are to be inserted into the rings, so that they will be on the 2 sides of the altar when it is carried.
God required daily sacrifices to be made, continually confirming the covenant between himself and the people. These sacrifices and offerings would be
A pleasing aroma, an offering made to the Lord by fire, for generations to come. This burnt offering is to be made regularly at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. There I will meet with you and speak to you. There also I will meet with the Israelites, and the place will be consecrated by my glory.
Next, we see a large basin of water placed strategically between the brazen altar and the tent of meeting. The laver was a vessel of physical and symbolic cleansing for the priests in their service before the Lord. It was absolutely essential that they were to be clean before beginning the process of meeting with their holy God.
Make a bronze basin, with it a bronze stand for washing. Place it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it. Aaron and his sons are to wash their hands and feet with water from it. Whenever they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water, so that they will not die. Also, when they approach the altar to minister by presenting an offering made to the Lord by fire, they shall wash their hands and feet, so that they will not die. This is to be a lasting ordinance for Aaron and his descendants for the generations to come.
Once again, we come to a place of further separation and increasing holiness, for only the priests would enter into the tent of meeting to tend to the tasks inside. The curtain served to place emphasis on purity and consecration, which were prerequisites before proceeding into the first room of the tent of meeting. This visual reminder heightened the importance of God's holiness.
Make a lampstand of pure gold and hammer it out, base and shaft. Its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms shall be of one piece with it. 6 branches are to extend from the sides of the lampstand, 3 on one side, 3 on the other. Then make it 7 lamps, and set them upon it so that they light the space in front of it. Its wick trimmers and trays are to be of pure gold. A talent of pure gold is to be used for the lampstand and all its accessories. See that you make them according to the pattern shown you on the mountain.
Closed off from the outside world, the single source of light for the holy place came from the 7 lamps atop the golden lampstand. The combined light of these oil lamps would reflect well off the walls, since they were covered completely with gold. The ambient glow of the lampstand would illumine across the room to the table of showbread. On this table were kept 12 loaves of fresh bread, 1 for each tribe, as a continual reminder of man's need for God's provision. This offering of bread was called the bread of presence, since it was kept before God's presence.
Make a table of acacia wood 2 cubits long, a cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, and make a gold molding around it. Also make around it a rim a handbreadth wide, and put a gold molding on the rim. Make 4 gold rings for the table, and fasten them to the 4 corners, where the 4 legs are. The rings are to be close to the rim to hold the poles used in carrying the table. Make the poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold, and carry the table with them. And make its plates and dishes of pure gold, as well as its pitchers and bowls for the pouring out of offerings. Put the bread of presence on this table to be before me at all times.
Since the desert was not a source of abundant food, God provided all the food the Israelites needed to sustain them. The table of showbread, then, represented an offering to God. They would give an offering of their first fruits from the abundance that He had provided. It was a thanks offering, expressing gratitude for God's abundant blessings. The altar of incense represented the need for the prayers of the people to be continuously directed upwards toward God, and that those same prayers would be received by God as a sweet aroma and be pleasing to His ear.
Make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense. It is to be square, a cubit long and a cubit wide, and 2 cubits high. Its horns of one piece with it. Overlay the top and all the sides and the horns with pure gold, and make a gold molding around it. Make 2 gold rings for the altar below the molding, 2 on opposite sides, to hold the poles to carry it. Make the poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold.
Just beyond the altar of incense was the Holy of Holies. This dwelling place of God was so solemn and set apart that the veil would only be opened once a year. It was then that the high priest would meet with God. Pushing back the veil reveals the article above which this most holy meeting would occur, the Ark of the Covenant.
Have them make a chest of acacia wood, 2½ cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out, and and make a gold molding around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet, with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the chest to carry it. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2½ cubits long, and 1½ cubits wide. And make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub on one end, and the 2nd cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover at the 2 ends. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark, and put in the ark the testimony, which I will give you. There, above the cover between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the testimony, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites.
Stored inside the ark were 3 very important reminders of the people's relationship with God. Each one reminded the Israelites of having learned a specific lesson from God. The value in keeping these 3 items was to build a remembrance of God's provision and direction for his children. Since the desert could not produce enough food for all the people, God provided a special food for them every morning, manna. 6 days of every week, they collected this heaven-sent food. The Israelites had received this manna faithfully each morning for 40 years. As an enduring testimony, a golden pot filled with manna was kept inside the ark. Inside the golden pot was an omar's worth of manna, or 1 day's portion. The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omar of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt. Then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna in front of the testimony that it might be kept. The difficulties of life in the desert became a heavy toll for many of the Israelites. They even revolted against the leaders God had chosen for them. Yet, God proved to them that he had chosen their leader. The sign for this was Aaron's rod that had miraculously budded, flowered, and bore almonds all in one night. This was their reminder to not complain against the Lord's chosen.
Speak to the Israelites and get 12 staffs from them, 1 from the leader of each of their ancestral tribes. Write the name of each man on his staff. On the staff of Levi, write Aaron's name, for there must be 1 staff for the head of each ancestral tribe. Place them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony, where I meet with you. The staff belonging to the man I choose will sprout, and I will rid myself of this constant grumbling against you by the Israelites.
The next day, Moses entered the tent of the testimony and saw that Aaron's staff, which represented the house of Levi, had not only sprouted, but had budded, blossomed, and produced almonds. The Lord said to Moses,
Put back Aaron's staff in front of the testimony, to be kept as a sign to the rebellious. This will put an end to their grumbling against me, so that they will not die.
The best known of the reminders kept inside the ark were the 2 stone tablets engraved with the 10 Commandments. These tablets contained the primary rules they were to live by, which would protect and govern them. God would also use these to examine their faithfulness and commitment to following him.
Chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets.
So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and went up to Mount Sinai early in the morning, as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hand.
I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, or the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant or maidservant, his ox or his donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor.
It is here, just above the cover to the Ark of the Covenant, also known as the mercy seat, here in this space where the cherubim have set their full attention, that God's presence would appear to and meet with the high priest on a specified day, and then only once a year. The Holy of Holies had no lampstand, no artificial light was permitted. Here in this place, where the immortal God would meet with mortal man, the only light came from the powerful purity found in the presence of God. God told Moses that this earthly tabernacle was a model of the true one in heaven. He was to construct the tabernacle according to the pattern God showed him. The physical pattern was a model of spiritual patterns that were to be followed as well. We see the fulfillment of all these patterns, or lessons, in the person of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, who is the Messiah. Through his sacrifice on the cross, he made it possible for us to come into a personal relationship with the Creator of the universe. When we come to fully understand and trust in Jesus as Messiah, we can then stand before God, cleansed and forgiven.
All right, I know that was a lot for many of us, maybe that this is brand new to. So I want to do a couple things. We are going to go through and make sure I've got all the words okay. Well, let me just make a couple of comments. First of all, the reason for the tabernacle was to give a place for people to gather together. Meeting together has changed form over the years. First it was the tabernacle. The reason it was a tabernacle was a tent. Because why? Because the Jews were wandering around in the desert for how long? 40 years. So they could be set up, taken down, and set up in another place and taken down. Later, when they settled, the tabernacle was no longer needed, but what was set up in its place? The temple. The temple was set up in its place as a permanent place for people to meet with God. And so meeting together has changed form over the years, but it's still very, very vital. Hebrews 11:25 says this, "Don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together, as some do. And even so, the much more, as you see the day coming," speaking of return of Christ. So the point is, meeting together is incredibly important. And I know, we've talked about this before. And when people aren't here, I realize sickness happens and holidays, all those things, that's a very real part of life. I understand that. But when people aren't here because they just aren't here, that you're really missed. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. It's encouraging other people. It's being here to rub shoulders with other like-minded people who love God and want to serve God. Okay, so meeting together is incredibly important. The form has changed over the years, but meeting together is still vital. If you notice on that video, it talked about each of the different pieces of the tabernacle. And they had significance, they had meaning. And I learned a lot, and I've been doing this a long time. It had meaning, and I didn't realize that inside that innermost place that there was no artificial light allowed. Because when God met with the high priest, how often was it? Once a year. That God himself would be the light. Actually, I was thinking about, and if you read in Revelation, it says also that there's no artificial light because God himself will be the light. I never put those two together. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And everything about the tabernacle points to one person and one person only, and that is Jesus. One thing I want to bring out, and then we'll go through the words. It mentioned about a curtain that was between the innermost place and then the outer area. If you remember, when Jesus died, it actually talks about that within the temple, that curtain actually tore in two of its own accord, from top to the bottom, symbolizing what? That not just the priest, not just the high priest can have access to God once a year, but it opened the door for anybody and everybody. What great news that is. So what does that mean? That means that each one of us, if you are a believer in Christ, if you're a follower of Jesus, that you are a priest in your own right. You don't have to wear a collar, okay? You don't have to go to seminary, you don't have to do all the education, but you are a priest as a follower of Christ. What an amazing thing. We have access to God. We can go to God in prayer anytime, day or night, and He is there. Lessons from the tabernacle. What an amazing thing. Amazing. Okay, let's go through this. How many think you got 100%? How many? Good. Okay. Okay. I know this will be, maybe I tried to make sure that everything was in there. You may have missed some things, but we'll make sure we get this. Okay. First of all, the what? People. The people gave toward the materials for the building of the tabernacle. Number 2, because the Jews disobeyed God, they had to wander the desert for 40 years. Well done. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, show God's presence to Israel. The tabernacle was put in the middle, well done, of the camp of Israel. God would not allow sin into His presence. The altar, A-L-T-A-R, was the first thing you see when you enter the tabernacle area. Number 8, the brazen laver, or the basin, contained water. Well done. For the priests to cleanse themselves, the Jewish family called the Levites. Well done. I don't know, I was listening for that. I know he said it several times, but I'm not sure if it was in the right order. Called the Levites were the priests. Number 10, the tent area which contained various bits was called the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting. The lampstand was made out of gold. gold. Matter of fact, there's lots of things that were made out of gold, weren't they? The lampstand was the single source of light for the interior part of the tabernacle. Number 13. The 12 loaves of bread that were on the table were called the bread of presence. Not Present, not that kind. Presence of God. To remind them of what? The table of showbread was an expression of thanks to God for his provision of bread in the desert. The altar of incense represented the prayers. Oh, New Door didn't get that one. Represented the prayers of the people upwards to God. The Holy of Holies. You may not have heard that term before. The Holy of Holies was the innermost part of the tabernacle. The high priest was allowed to enter his area only once a year to meet with God. Inside the Ark of the Covenant was a jar of special food that God provided to the Jews called manna. M-A-N-N-A. Bonus question: how much was it? What was the volume? No. What? I was wondering how many people would come. It is a different spelling, but it is pronounced the same. And no more. O-M-A-E-R. It is interesting, same pronunciation. Okay. So it is a volume. Okay. Inside the Ark of the Covenant was a rod. Now that was a story I don't think we've ever touched on before. But there was an argument about who was going to be the leaders and so forth and so on. God said, okay, we'll sort this out. A miracle was done to indicate that Aaron would be the one. His staff was put on there and it budded in almonds as it explained. Number 20. Inside the Ark of the Covenant were 2 stone tablets, the 10 Commandments. Everybody's got that. Just above the Ark of the Covenant was the mercy seat, where God would meet with the high priest once a year. The tabernacle was a picture symbol of everything related to Jesus. Certainly well done. Okay. So how many got all of them? Bar one. Oh, all of them. Bar one. Very good. Well done. Okay, everyone. Bar two. Oh, very good. Well done. Okay, that was excellent. So I hope that from this we'll come to an appreciation of what the tabernacle was all about, pointing eventually to Jesus. We're going to have a prayer. God, I want to thank you for today. And Lord, I know today was a bit different, but thinking about the tabernacle and all what it was and all what it meant, all the symbolism. And God, there's lots that we could talk about with each individual item, and we will be getting to that at some point. But Father, I want to thank you for that broad overview today, and I pray, Father, that you'd help us as we think. Number one, maybe first of all, that as that curtain was torn, allowing us access to you directly, Father, help us to be thankful for that. And then number two, as we think about it, that the priest, no one was allowed into God's presence with any sin. There's no way that we could be without sin, but only because of what Jesus did for us, providing forgiveness. God, help us to be thankful for that. And Lord, when I ask that your blessing would be on every person, every family this week, God, that help us to honor you. We pray for your protection, your strength, for all that's going to be happening. I dedicate to you. In Jesus' name.